video, I talked about how the C major scale is based on two four-note sequences that have the same interval structure. We call them tetrachords. The four-note sequence of C, D, E, F consists of two whole steps, C to D, whole step, D to E, whole step, E to F, half step, two whole steps and a half step. G, A, B, C, the second half of the scale, follows the same structure. G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, B to C is a half step. So you have two identical four-note sequences, tetrachords, with a whole step in between them. And that idea of playing the scale on a single string really reveals the interval structure a lot more clearly than if you were to play the scale in a single position. But that single position scale is probably the more practical scale in everyday use. But this really reveals the structure of the scale, and it gives you a chance to really move around the fingerboard in bigger jumps, and that's a good thing to develop as well. But now there's some ramifications of that we can explore beyond the C major scale. So, for instance, say we start on the lowest fingered note on the fingerboard. That would be an F. And we use that same basic structure to move up the neck from F to G to A to B flat. So now we're essentially going to be in the key of F major. And instead of staying on that string and going from F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, all on one string, we're going to break this scale up into two strings now so that we have the first four notes, F, G, A, B flat, on the sixth string or on the low E string, and the next four notes will follow on the fifth string from C. So you have a scale that is still made up of those four-note groups, and when you go between the two strings, you may notice that my hand position here will take me from my fourth finger on the sixth fret to my first finger on the third fret, and that is a spacing of one hand position. So the whole step from the fourth finger to the first finger between those two strings is simply just a matter of lining up the fingers with the frets and then repeating the pattern. So now you have an F major scale that takes you across two strings and from the first fret to the eighth fret. What next? Where do we go next? Well, if we were to continue in the same key, so in the same key, the key of F, and go to the next note in the key from F, we would be on G on the fourth string, which is the fifth fret on the fourth string. So now, and from there we're going to continue up in the scale. So we've got G, A, B flat, C. Well, now instead of having the half step between the third and fourth finger like it was for the first two tetrachords, the half step will fall in the middle of the tetrachord between the second and third finger. And then we're going to continue and do the same thing again on the next string. So now we have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, G. That second pair of tetrachords starting from G, that is Dorian mode. We haven't talked about modes yet, and there's a lot of discussion about modes all over the place, and a lot of different takes on what modes are and how they work and what you should do with them, etc., etc., etc. Well, modes, I'll give you my take. Modes are subsets of a scale of a particular key. So if we're in the key of F, we're going to be in the key of F because that's the lowest fingered note on the guitar, and it just makes this exercise a little easier. In the key of F, F major, the first scale, going from F to F, that is also known as Ionian mode. So we can call that F Ionian. The next mode begins on the second step of the key, or the second step of the F major scale, or the key of F major, and that note is G. Now, instead of going back to this G that we already played, we're going to continue up and find this G to continue our scale, and that will place us at the beginning of Dorian mode, which is the second mode in the key of F, or the second mode in any major key. So we have the... And now we're going to start from G, and when we do that in the key of F, we have G, A, B flat, C, so the half step falls in the middle of that tetrachord, and then D, E, F, G, and the half step falls in the middle of that tetrachord. So once again, we have two identical tetrachords, two identical four-note sequences. Makes it a little easier to remember and to keep track of where those notes are, starting from G. So you're simply skipping a fret for the whole step, half step between the two middle fingers, whole step, and doing that again. Lining up the fingers with the frets as you go between the strings. Can you see that okay? Let's get that right there. Right. So that's G, A, B, B flat, C. That's a C. Then we got D, E, F, G. Now when we get to the next note is going to be an A. And it happens that, of course, we're crossing between the third string and the second string. We've got our fourth finger on G, which is the third string, 12th fret. And now the first finger is going to A, 10th fret, second string. So crossing from there to there is one less space for a whole step, from the 12th fret to the 10th fret. And now, starting from A, this is going to be the third mode in the key of F, and we call that Phrygian mode, or some people pronounce it Phrygian. Phrygian mode, A, B flat, C, D. Now the half step falls between the first and second note of the mode, A, B flat, C, D, and then we again line our fingers up with the frets the same way as we started out. The original whole step between the two strings from the second string to the first string takes us from the 15th fret to the 12th fret, E, F, G, A. So that last mode has two tetrachords, each beginning with a half step followed by two whole steps. So it's exactly the opposite of the first tetrachord. Now, as you can see, this enables you to find parts of the fingerboard, find musical ideas in parts of the fingerboard that are really far apart from each other with absolute certainty. I know that if I'm starting on F and I want to go to Phrygian mode, starting on A, I can find it here. This scale now, every single note I played, the key of F major, running through several modes, 3 modes so far that we've identified. But in fact, there are 2 other modes buried in that pattern. For instance, we don't have to begin on F and play a complete F major scale. We can begin on the second tetrachord of that scale, which puts us on C, and still in the key of F, we're going to go C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C. So the half step falls at the end of the first tetrachord, in the middle of the second tetrachord of that mode. And since we're in the key of F and we're starting on C, that's what we call Mixolydian mode. That's based on the 5th step of the key of F. And just as we did with that mode, starting from Ionian mode going to Mixolydian mode, we can go to Dorian mode, which starts on G, and then just pick it up from the second tetrachord of Dorian mode. That's going to take us to D, which is the fifth step of the Dorian mode, and that is going to give us Aeolian mode, because D is the sixth of F, and that is the sixth mode of any key, is called the Aeolian mode, which is a minor scale. So we have 5 modes embedded were clearly embedded in this big scale I call the master modal scale, by taking 2 consecutive strings with 4 notes each. This may be a little bit to sort of grasp this way, but I'm going to put a link to some graphs and diagrams that will help to kind of solidify this idea for you. There are 2 more modes that we haven't examined yet, Lydian mode and Locrian mode. The Lydian mode and the Locrian mode play by slightly different rule than the other modes, and this is because when we take any of the modes and break them into 2 4-note chunks, tetrachords, in the 5 modes that we've looked at, each of those tetrachords consists of 4 notes spanning a perfect fourth. That means 2 whole steps and 1 half step. With Lydian mode and Locrian mode, one of those 4-note blocks in each of those modes is a tritone, which is 3 whole steps in a row. I'll show you what I mean. If we start on the note B flat, that's the 4th note in the key of F. The next note is C, the next note is D, the next note is E. B flat, C, D, E. That is a tritone. The word tritone is derived from the use of the word tone to mean whole step. So a tritone is 3 whole tones or 3 whole steps. Those are the first 4 notes of the Lydian mode. Now, very often you will hear the Lydian mode referred to as a major scale with a sharp 4. Well, yeah, that's true. But when you take the first 4 notes of a major scale and you raise the 4th by a half step, what you end up with is a tritone, 3 whole steps to begin. The next interval after that 4th is going to be a half step. So that will take us from B flat A, B flat C D E to F. E to F is a half step, of course, and then we go F G A B flat. So the last 4 notes in the Lydian mode actually do begin the major scale in that key. So that's Lydian mode. Locrian mode begins on the 7th step of the key, which means it begins on E in the key of F. E, F, G, A, half step, whole step, followed by B flat, C, D, E. The last 4 notes in the Locrian mode are the first 4 notes in the Lydian mode. And so the Lydian mode and the Locrian mode are linked by this tritone. And if we take the tritone of the Lydian mode and the tritone of the Locrian mode, and then we play the notes that kind of fall in between, starting on E to F to G to A to B flat. So we're going from B flat to E, or E to B flat, which is the inversion of the tritone. In other words, we're playing the same distance, but instead of playing an augmented fourth, which is a 4-note sequence where the 4th step has a sharp or a raised interval, we are playing from in the opposite direction. Instead of starting on B flat and going to E, we are starting on E and ascending to B flat. E, F, G, A, B flat, 5 notes. And The same distance in terms of, say, if you're counting half steps, you would count the same number of half steps, 6 half steps. 3 whole steps is 6 half steps. But within the structure of the key, you are not playing 3 whole steps. You're playing a half step first, then a whole step, then a whole step, and then a half step. This brings up the issue of counting intervals based on half steps. And it's a particular, I really should say, it's a particular peeve of mine to hear intervals being described as a specific number of half steps, because it disregards the structure of the key. So for instance, if you say that a major third is 4 half steps instead of referring to it as 2 whole steps, it's true, a major third is 4 half steps, but describing it that way kind of obliterates the structure of the key. We don't play the notes that don't belong to the key when we think in terms of intervals. When we think in terms of intervals within a key, we only play the notes that belong to the key, and in fact the names of the intervals are derived by the notes that are actually employed or used within the key. So a major third is called a major third because it has 3 notes to create the third. 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3, 4, or 3, 4, 5. The half steps, that the chromatic notes that fall in between, we don't count them and we don't play them. And this is why I'm going down this road, is because, well, a diminished fifth, by definition, has 5 notes in it, and this is how it sounds within the key. That's 6 half steps if you want to count all the half steps, but it's really a half step, whole step, half step. A tritone, let me try that from here. A tritone is also 6 half steps, but we don't count all those in between notes. We're just concerned with the 4 notes of the tritone, the 4 notes that belong within the key, and that gives us a very different musical idea. So while the tritone and the diminished fifth may function as inversions of each other if you kind of just treat the final notes, the beginning note and the end note of that interval, as the defining element, when you go from one note to the next, to the next, to the next, you get a very different idea if you're playing the tritone or if you're playing the diminished fifth, which is the inversion of the tritone. Just a little tangent. But this is really part and parcel of understanding how modes work. It isn't simply beginning and ending in a different part of the key. It is also understanding the character of the musical idea that is expressed when you do that. See you soon.